Ibrahim El-Zakzaky has returned back to Nigeria. What's going to happen next? Everyone is asking. And also, the anti-corruption fight has brought Okon, chairman of the Special Investigation Panel for the Recovery of Public Property, to a suspension by Mr. President. This is Plus Politics, and I am Maryann Okon. The leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, has returned to Nigeria from the Indian hospital where he had gone to receive medical attention. Now, I'm wondering, what is going to happen next? Still, I have in the studio my guest to have this conversation with me, Obi Ajegbo. She's a legal practitioner. Emeka Nwadioke is also a legal practitioner. Good to have you both join us.
Thank you so much.
All right, so straight into the conversation. The people protested, or his people protested, that he be allowed to travel to get some treatment, to get some help, because his according to them, his health had deteriorated. But here we are, a few days into his trip to India, he's demanding to come back to Nigeria. So let us all just speculate. What exactly do you think is the reason for Ibrahim El-Zakzaky being back to Nigeria all of a sudden?
It's the fear of deep-seated conspiracy.
Please explain to us. We'd like to know what exactly.
Deep-seated conspiracy is a conspiracy by top government echelons to achieve a common aim. There he was in India, muzzled by the DSSS and representative of the Indian government. He panicked.
But why would he panic? I mean, he knew what he was going in for. He knew. I mean, whether lawyers or attorneys take what the Kaduna state government had reeled out seriously or not, that somewhat had given him an idea of what he was to expect while he was in India. So why would he panic?
You see, also the fact that it's a matter of life and death. And operations would have to be done. He needed his own person to be there. He needed his own person to oversee whatever is done, because any mistake, he will not be alive anymore. So since that is in there, and then plus the deep-seated conspiracy, he backed off. That's my interpretation of everything.
Deep-seated conspiracies. Emeka Nwadioke, I'm just wondering, do you think that probably El-Zakzaky was not as sick as he was portrayed to be, or could he also be that maybe, let's just buy into what he's saying, that he was not being treated properly, he wasn't getting the kind of care that he needed, it was too shabby, and he said, what's the essence, let me just come back home and die?
Yes, actually I watched his the recording by El-Zakzaky himself, which was interpreted. And essentially what he said was that he doesn't have much trust in the Mendeta hospital. Because at any rate, he even claimed that when they got to Mendeta, they wanted to transfer them to another hospital, which is Fortis. And he said no, that the agreement we had coming to India was to come to Mendeta. Then when they now eventually settled for Mendeta, I think Mendeta, probably due to their standard procedure, said we have to start running all the tests afresh. The gentleman says no. I had my doctors examine me. I know why I came here. I came for a specific purpose. Treat me and let me go home. And there was disagreement over that. And aside from that also, the more like security cordon around him, because there was even the claim by his supporters down here that there was even security men inside the room, his room, and all that. So I guess all that, he didn't find that very funny, all the pressure and everything. And fundamentally, he didn't have the trust that, again, there was even a claim that maybe there was some consular meeting prior to their arriving in India, between the Nigerian embassy and some officials of the hospital or something like that, which is to say whether he should be poisoned or whatever. In fact, there was a claim by when they gave the, when these people down here gave a press conference that the target is to kill him. And they even mentioned the United States, mentioned all kinds of theories, you know the usual,
yes.
face-off between U.S. and Iran. So I guess international politics is a bit complex, but essentially I want to believe that he didn't have the trust of the hospital that he will come out of the place alive if he doesn't have his own doctors participating in the process.
So I'm curious as to how we even got ourselves involved in this drama, because it's beginning to become one where the US is being brought into it, Iran is being brought to it, and several other people finger pointing. Is Nigeria at a point in its life where it should be getting embroiled in such imbroglios?
You see, in Nigeria we have square holes in round, square pegs in round holes. First of all, I still blame Nigeria for the metamorphosizing of Nnamdi Kanu, because they had no business incarcerating him. Now, there are other ways this man should have been handled. They've now brought him to the forefront of Nigerian history and international, even international
global,
now.
Yes.
Global. They've given him a name, they've given him a voice.
Yes.
And I don't know why our government would do that. Maybe they should try recruiting the right people. There are some people that are left in their ignoble status. By the time you make a fuss about them, they now become superstars, which as El-Zakzaky has been turned into on our hands now.
How do we deal with this? Because whether we like it or not, like she has said, we have one way or the other gotten involved, and we've given something a face that shouldn't have had a face in the first instance. Is there anything that we can do to clear this out, or is the administration going to insist on carrying on with this? Because everybody's asking, what next? The man is back here. What next?
Yeah, just like I said, it's complex. It's complex, but then again, I guess it's also the story of Nigeria. If our hospitals are working, what's our business taking anybody anywhere in the first instance?
That's true.
You get a point. So the president is sick, he runs to London.
Well, I think today in the news, the president said something about upgrading our hospitals to reduce medical tourism. And I heard one of the analysts on radio today asking who's the number one on that list of medical tourism, on a lighter note. Yes. So this also goes to show the incapacitated nature of our infrastructure, talking about health and other things. But the issue of insecurity, the main reason why the IMN were protesting and returned violence was for this man to get medical care. So now that he's back without that medical care, I'm asking this question again. Are we to expect more protest, or is he just going to face trial? You're a lawyer. Both of you are lawyers. Where do you think? What's the next step you think is that the courts is going to take?
He asked for bail, and he's been granted bail. He went for medical or non-medical, so they should take him back to where they got him from. Abi, they should take him back.
So do they have to wait for the number of days that was given to him to expire before he goes back to court, or will they fast track it?
It was for a specific purpose, medical. And he went, he refused the medical.
Yes, because again, you see a situation where, like someone said, it's not even technically a bail, more or less. It was almost like
a leave of sorts.
Yes, maybe leave to go and treat yourself and then come back, because again there was the issue of that he was requesting for his passport, and they said no one has granted you a bail, so why are you requesting for your passport? You are not a free man, more or less. So that said, the fact remains that now that he's back, because again the ruling is specific, go to so hospital, you know, and get treated. So nothing can be done outside that ruling. So ultimately he has to get back to the court for probably a variation. If they now agree that, okay, he can go to another hospital in another country, and then again, maybe they may also then plead for the inclusion of this issue of his own medical team being part of the team that will treat him wherever he goes. Because again, that was the issue in India.
India, yes.
You know, that his doctors were even around or within the hospital facility, but they were not allowed to be part of the medical team. So obviously, like I said, nothing can be done outside that ruling, because the ruling was quite specific, and until it's varied, I guess he will be a customer of the DSS for.
But his daughter had a response. I don't know if my producers have that. She put out a statement talking about his health and talking about the fact that she had some form of lead poisoning, allegedly, and that he might die anytime soon. That also raises another issue. Please, if we do have that report, I'd like it to be flashed on the screen. But is that not another stare in that pot if they're saying he was poisoned? Where did the poison come from? And I'm saying, because if there is some form, okay, so she said, I'm really worried, especially because of the lead and cadmium poisoning. His doctor said if he gets a certain level, or if it gets to a certain level, his organs could start failing, and that's really scary, because that means he could just die at any moment. And that's from his daughter, Shuaila. So does this not open another can of worms if there is an alleged poisoning? I think deepening our issue?
Yeah, I think the poisoning, when they say lead, maybe I might want to link it to, you know, that the fact that he has a bullet, so to speak, in his body during the attack by the military, you know, during that confrontation that claimed about over 300 lives of his members. So I guess probably in the bullet, if it's there, may have begun to deteriorate or manifest into lead, then seeping into his organs and things like that. But that's only a conjecture. But fundamentally, I've also taken the position that the federal government, which actually issued a statement to that effect, the procedure of proscribing these organizations was a position I took during the IPOB, this and that. For me, it's not entirely constitutional, because don't just wake up, you know, you go before a judge, you are not hearing the other side, and you proscribe a group of persons. Although subsequently you give them opportunity to maybe
but the law makes an opening for that ex parte to motion to be taken advantage of.
That's what I mean, that it ordinarily ought not to even have been an ex parte motion. You ought to put the other people on notice, so they the court can hear them. So because by the time you prescribe them, they've already been stigmatized and all that. So it could even begin to play on the mind of the court whether to, and you know all the kinds of pressures that the judiciary is under to lift that kind of ban, more so when probably such a group is said to be disrupting some, disrupting things, or disturbing public peace and all that. Because look at the IPOB issue. IPOB, they hardly have cutlasses. So when you compare them to real terrorist organizations, so that word terrorism, it's in law we know what it means. So, and these people, for instance, they are coming under the decision that they are just a sect. In fact, their claim is that they are being marginalized because they are a Shia sect of the Muslim faith, while the Sunni is the dominant faith, maybe in government. So all these dynamics are playing out. And
could this be an Israeli-Palestinian kind of drama where, I know that's a totally different ball game, but I'm saying, I'm towing the line. if it's a religious issue, and this has been the questions I've been asking from the beginning, why did we allow it to spiral into becoming a national and now an international issue? I mean, we have the different Christian faiths all, you know, doing their own thing one way or the other, not minding who's minority and who's majority. Do we see the prescription and all of this drama that is happening around El-Zakzaky and he's returning to Nigeria fomenting trouble for us in the future? And are there better ways to address this, and rather than the way that the government had already told, the line that the government has already told?
You know, I've always been screaming that we should have restructuring.
But that takes a longer time. We don't even know what kind of restructuring we want, because people keep screaming restructuring, but we do not know what exactly
now,
or how it works.
If I were to advise the government, I would tell them to leave the man.
Okay.
Let him be. And let the intelligence monitor him. Let him be free. Let the intelligence monitor him. He will use his hand to rope himself, and everybody will see what is going on.
So you're saying that we're causing more trouble instead of creating peace?
If he goes back to incarceration, we will now have the same march past. And if you notice something about those march past, they're uniformed. They are trained. That means they have some serious funding. And that is where I would start if I was a government official, to find out the source of the funding and then trace it and put an end to that. That's number one. Then number two, I would also look at the pros and cons of keeping this man incarcerated. What are the benefits of keeping him incarcerated? The aim we want to achieve, are we achieving it there, or are we creating a multi-hydrated being that will now cause us problems? This was how Boko Haram started. It was a small thing which could have been nipped, but the wrong advice, it blew out of proportion. The first person went, they did not know that the first person they killed was a saint, and then now we have another person.
Interesting. Finally, if in case, and I'm not trying to preempt any more trouble in Nigeria, but every time, I mean, we have a Showore in custody as we speak, and there are still people who are protesting, whether in person or on social media, who are going to the press every single day. The government of the day, and maybe other governments, subsequent governments to come, she's given her piss on El-Zakzaky. How best should we handle issues such as this, especially protests? I was watching the news, and in Zimbabwe, they're literally beating up protesters in the streets because they're not allowed to protest. And guess why they're protesting? Bad economy. There's some form of food shortage also in Zimbabwe, but then the people are whipped out there on the streets. So that we don't become a Zimbabwe and try to tell people when or when not to protest, going forward, as lawyers, how do should governments deal with issues such as this, especially agitations?
Yes, for me, it all boils down to the rule of law. If the rule of law prevails, everyone is fine.
Does the rule of law prevail in Nigeria?
It's very questionable. In fact,
you're an officer of the law, so does the rule of law prevail in Nigeria?
Because the rule of law is sometimes not from the judiciary angle. You know, the rule of law is all-encompassing. The executive has a role to play, the legislature has a role to play. And then even when you have a deputy senate president now telling you that he is the chief defender of the president, you know you have a challenge in your hand, because he is supposed to be checking the president. But he tells you now that nobody can impeach the president. So, but that's an aside. But fundamentally, yeah, like I said, the rules have to just be implemented. It's not a case of maybe you think you now have a magic wand. If one small ragtag group, makes some noise and maybe tries to canvass for their rights, you just get your attorney general to move into court and declare them a terrorist organization. Because actually even the United Nations rapporteur said that that minority groups are now being targeted through all these terrorism, using these terrorism laws to clamp down on them. So we definitely need to look seriously into that and ensure that, you know, the government, you know, keeps to its role of maintaining the rule of law and then protecting the rights of the citizens. And also, the issue I also talked about as regards trying to protect, in fact, an activist recently talked about that a lot of his friends have disappeared. You know, disappearances in Nigeria, and we are talking of a credible, you know, activist. So it's not to Uhuru, definitely, as regards human rights and the rule of law in Nigeria, and we have to be worried, very worried.
And recently, a group of people who we don't know who they are, recently went to Amnesty International to ask them to pack up and leave. And we haven't heard from the presidency to say that is wrong. Amnesty International is an international organization. We may not necessarily agree with everything that they say, but nobody... So again, all of this very loud silences, does it point to the fact that we may just become a Zimbabwe one day? Same question I asked him.
I'm believing that Nigerians are different from Zimbabweans. I'm believing that we are more tenacious when we set our heart to do something.
Are we?
Yes, we are.
You're believing, but are we?
Yes, we are.
Because since after the clampdown on Showore, there's not been really anybody protesting out there.
Because there was some documentation that I was privileged to see that now started casting aspersions on people. And immediately I saw it, I spoke to one of his right-hand men. He said that's a cover-up. But I have the privilege of speaking to his right-hand man. But not everybody has. And if you read what I read, you would not feel, you would say, they are all the same. Maybe that thing has circulated. I don't know. But I feel that fine, there's a lot of clamping of people done and everything. But I still feel that we can never get to Zimbabwe.
And also, we also need to even be worried when you know that the United Nations Special Rapporteur is coming to Nigeria as regards extrajudicial killings and all that. They don't just come into a country just like, it's not a tea party. So it tells you that there are fundamental issues that have to be dealt with by...
Interesting. I want to thank you very much. Emeka Nwadioke and Obi Ajegbo, they're both legal practitioners. They're not going anywhere. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be speaking on the return of the anti-corruption fight and Obono Obla's saga. Stay with us.